Guys who proposed and got rejected, what happened afterwards? Story 1. My 7th grade teacher brought his girlfriend to school to propose to her in front of our entire class, and she said no, and it was the topic of discussion almost every day that year, and he ended up moving schools at the end of the year. I cannot imagine a woman who would want her proposal to happen in front of a middle school class. That's just WTF energy. There was this girls' camp I went to for a few years as a kid. Every year on the last morning, campers would go on a hike that started at 2 a.m. and we would be at the top of the mountain for sunrise. One year, a counselor's boyfriend showed up at sunrise and proposed in front of all of us, 12 to 13-year-old girls. She said yes, and we were all happy. The next year, that same counselor was there. It was unusual for the counselors to be married, so I asked another one if she'd gotten married, and she told me that she actually called off the engagement later that day. She just didn't want to embarrass the guy in front of a bunch of preteens. Middle and high school teacher here. When I was dating my now husband, and marriage talks came up, I made it abundantly clear that any proposal that had anything to do with school or the students would most certainly be a no. He never would have done that. But I had to make it clear. We had 2 substitute teachers who were a couple proudly stand in front of our rowdy class and announce how in love they were. The woman was in her 50s and the guy was in his 20s. I wonder if they're still haunted by the very audible ew and gross. It was weird. It's already been established in the thread that proposing in public isn't a good idea, but that's a whole other level. The dude brought his girlfriend to his job so that he could propose in front of a bunch of 7th graders. They aren't like little kids. They're fully aware of what's happening, and 7th graders can be ruthless. I want to know what this guy's thought process was here. I only ever had one teacher move schools out of sheer reputation loss and shame. My freshman year, the English teacher was pulling up a YouTube video for the class, and she was sharing her screen on a projector. She went to the section that showed liked videos and playlists. She had several fart fetish playlists lined up, and the whole class lost their marbles. People started recording the filming of her screen and sending it out on Instagram and Snap, and that teacher never lived it down. Then she left. Her excuse at the moment was my daughter must have put that there. Story 2. I can tell you what happens when you propose and she isn't feeling it, but says yes anyway because of social pressure. A very awkward, sad time until you finally have the talk you should have had before proposing. Facts. My ex proposed to me at Christmas in front of his entire family 2 hours away from home. I was 18. My ex did something similar. He pressured me into visiting with his family for Christmas in 2022. At that time, we had only been seeing each other for literally 2 months, so I told him that it was a little too soon. He badgered and pressured me into it, until I felt so bad that I felt like I couldn't say no. He told me that his mother had already bought Christmas gifts for me and how I could say no to his mother. Anyway, he proposed a couple of months later, and I initially told him that again. I thought it was too soon. In fact, I tried to end the relationship. He again pressured me and talked me down, and stupid me thinking that we could work through it. I ended up leaving him about 6 months later. He became extremely controlling and verbally abusive. No surprise there, given how he was acting in the beginning. I literally had to sneak away to get away from him. That was about a year ago. Yeah, don't propose in public, folks. Bad form, ultimately. Better advice, a proposal should never come as a surprise, meaning you should have already had the "do you want to get married to me? And are you ready?" talk before proposing. The time and place can be a surprise. Not me, but my parents were out at a bar with some friends who had gotten engaged a few months before. It came up in conversation, and one of them brought up the idea of, "Hey, we should get married too." They had a very long conversation about it and realized they were both serious. My dad proposed on the spot with an onion ring. Went out and bought an actual engagement ring the next morning. Yes, this. I don't want it to be a surprise. My boyfriend kind of proposed when we were in a crowd at a music festival. It wasn't a planned thing. There was no ring. He just got caught up in the moment and asked, "Will you marry me?" We have never talked seriously about marriage before and have been working through some stuff in our relationship. So I stumbled over my words, and I was saying some version of, "I'm not really ready, there's a lot we need to talk about first," etc. Was kind of embarrassing for both of us that it happened with people around, not gonna lie though. It got me thinking, and ever since I've been overwhelmed with this feeling that I want to spend my life with this person, and now I do want to talk about marriage. Just don't propose out of the blue. I said no, even though now it's got me thinking I do want to marry this guy. We had talked about it, but hadn't set anything in stone for my second marriage. I had this wild idea to propose outdoors on our favorite hiking trail early in the morning. This did not happen. We got to the lookout point way too late in the morning, and I swear every prospective student for the spring semester was there with their parents. And tías y tíos. It was a mess. So flash forward early in the evening and we are dropping her daughter off at her dad's place and going to our favorite jazz club. Boom, flat tire on the highway. I'm out there dodging traffic trying to get the spare on. By the time we get back home, I kneel in her galley kitchen and say, before the roof falls on my head, will you marry me? We just had our first anniversary in the spring. And we got a great story out of it. Story 3. We'd been joking around about it for months. I'd ask sarcastically in the most unromantic way, she'd say no, we'd laugh and move on with our day. I'd apparently conditioned her so well that when I asked for real, she flippantly turned me down. And everyone around me either gasped or got this really awkward look on their face. She changed her tune real quick when she actually looked and saw me holding the ring. We've been married for 17 years now. Good times. My childhood best friend's parents also have a story regarding proposal conditioning. One of them had a rowboat that they'd used to hang out on the water all the time. One day, he brought a fake ring, proposed, and then accidentally dropped the ring in the lake. They laughed. Whatever. He did it a second time. Then, he brought the real ring for a real proposal. She was onto him though and grabbed the ring and tossed it into the lake. They've been married for like 100 years, so it ended fine. But he sort of deserved that. I hope he got insurance on the ring. Reminds me of the lady who always said no whenever her man asked her anything, including if she was hungry. When he finally proposed to her, she was so used to him relenting and just dealing with her joke that when he was stunned into silence from her saying no, she just sat there laughing to herself, waiting for him to ask again like he normally did. Apparently, the fact that he was proposing to her wasn't enough for her to take him seriously, even when he had said before that he didn't like her joke. After like 10 or so seconds of her just quietly laughing to herself and staring him down, he just got up and walked away, realizing he would have to put up with it for the rest of his life, and he just didn't want to. Even when she, her mother, and all their family members were telling him to go back to her, he just didn't have it in him anymore. I'm glad this is the happy version of that story though. Good on you. The same thing happened to me. My now husband would constantly start getting down on one knee at random times and then pretend to tie his shoe or pick something up. When the time finally came to be serious, I had him panicking. The entire video of him proposing was me saying, "You're joking," over and over again, followed by, "Oh my god, you're not joking." I watched that video so many times and it puts a huge grin on my face. Story 4. I had a foreign student at my university whom I'd only spoken to on the phone a few times, and whom I'd never met call my father on Christmas morning of my freshman year. He asked my dad for my hand in marriage. They talked for ages, and my stupid father said yes. He was so out of touch with my life, he assumed the guy was my boyfriend. My dad thought I'd be thrilled, the idiot. My mom did something similar, but with an ex of mine whose proposal I had rejected and was considering getting a restraining order against. After I told him that he scared me and he needed to stay away or I'd call the cops and get the courts involved, he went to my mom's house and had a long chat with her about how much he loved me and we were meant to be together. My mom gave him her blessing. Also an idiot. Was that stupid foreign student from Asia or the Middle East? That happened to one of my friends. She's blonde and blue-eyed, and this guy just wouldn't leave her alone. It was almost like he wanted a white wife to brag to his friends from his country. She told him to go marry a nice girl from his own country instead. Somewhat related, I was working at a retail store while in university that had a guard, and the guard was located by the carts. There were a lot of Indian international students at my university, and a few of them worked at this store with me. One girl who was my age already had a husband back in India, and the guard at the store was from India. One day, this kid had crapped his pants while sitting in the cart. Didn't get any on the cart, thank God, but I guess it still smells bad. The guard complained about it and asked me to come to clean it, and I did. Later on, in the break room, the Indian girl colleague comes up to me and asks me if the guard had proposed to me. She thought since he pulled me aside to talk to me, he must have been asking for my hand in marriage. I did not want to get married, and I didn't know this guy, but at that moment I wish he had asked me to marry him instead of asking me to clean a poopy cart. Story 5. Not my own experience, but I was in the restaurant when a failed proposal happened. Somehow the guy was able to get the families involved in this fancy dinner without the girl's knowledge as to what was going to happen. He ordered their drinks, where he had the ring cleaned and then placed at the bottom of her pina colada drink. She gets up and then goes to the bathroom, and that's when some of her family moved in close with their cameras and phones ready for the proposal. She comes back and the drinks are brought. She refuses the drink, much to his dismay, but I don't get the hint. She doesn't want it. You should have your drink. It's really good. She says again, no. This goes on back and forth. Finally, she says no and is disturbed by his pushy behavior. I hear this from my table. I can't marry someone who won't respect my boundaries. She gets up and walks out of the restaurant. The guy sits there waiting for her to cool off. She doesn't come back in, so he fishes the ring out and has the drinks taken away. She comes back in near the end and he shows her the ring and tells her it was in the drink. And she slaps him and says no. This time she's angry and leaves. Everyone packs up and heads to pay. He just sits there by himself. I wanted to get up and say something, but my date was ready to go home. This makes me think that she told him not to propose in front of groups of people. I've read plenty of Reddit stories where the people said no specifically due to this, and the other side forced the situation anyways. It's a nice time to learn that your idea of a romantic/happy proposal may not look like your partner's idea of one. If you're the one proposing, best to stick to their idea of it. Anxiety levels can be massive at those times. Story 6. She told me, no, but wait a while and ask again, and I think it will be a yes. We're still married. I asked her at a party where we're all toked up. She told me to ask her again in the morning to make sure it wasn't just the marijuana talking. I asked her again in the morning and she said yes. We met in September. I asked her in December, and we got married the following July. Married 51 years next month. My husband proposed while we were cooking dinner one evening and I said yes. We never even looked at each other, just a couple of butt pats. Same as when he asked me to move in together and when we said I love you for the first time. We make a good team. I said to my now husband, if you're thinking about proposing, I would be happier if you didn't yet. He was really bummed, especially because he told a bunch of people it was happening. But 8 months later, I felt ready and I let him know. And it happened exactly how I wanted it. It's such a huge thing. I don't understand how people don't talk about it with each other anymore. Somewhat similar experience here. She told me no because 1, we'd had a tough discussion about having kids or not the day before that I'd somehow forgotten about, compounded by 2, I was high on edibles when going down on one knee while out camping in a national park. I'd had the ring with me for weeks. While we were backpacking together, she was like, I want you to be clear-headed when asking me this, and we should first agree on having kids or not. I was sad, but realized what a dummy I'd been the day after. We stayed together, bought a house, had 2 kids a few years later, and married when they were 3 and 1 years old. Been happy together throughout. Marriage is too important to decide on a whim. I know now. Story 7. Was with a girl for a couple of years. I started talking about getting married. She was up for it, but kinda distant about it. I take her out ring shopping and she breaks down, tells me she can't marry me. I was really confused. I thought things were going great. Turns out I was just the guy taking care of her until her ex got out of prison. I paid for her schooling and helped her get off drugs. We were looking at houses. I thought we were making a life together. She left me not long after that. He got out of prison a few months later. She went back to stripping. I ran into them a few times. I guess she's happy. My mom had a pattern of marrying men she believed that she could fix. Unfortunately, these relationships did not last. The last person was somewhat different, but even then, things weren't perfect. Sadly, she was considering divorce, but passed away first. Here's hoping you're different. Please don't enter relationships with the intention of fixing someone over and over again like my mom. If nothing else, your horrible experience can be an opportunity to learn. Story 8. Not a guy, but a girl. I asked my boyfriend to marry me. I didn't do a whole scene about it. We were talking and I said that I wanted to get married and I felt ready for it, and he just said no. I was mad. He had never mentioned this, and we've talked about it before. All he had ever said was that he didn't want it because it was expensive and didn't want a big party, and so, in my understanding, we would get married at the courthouse and have a small gathering with my family and close friends. Then I found out he didn't want to get married because his parents had a divorce, and he didn't want to go through that. It took a while to unravel all his issues with marriage. At a certain point, I said I'm not going to wait around with a guy that doesn't want to get married. I had always been very clear about wanting to get married. He disagreed and said I've also mentioned that I didn't want a big wedding. I'm like, what? We realized we were both talking about different things. He had put together the marriage and the wedding, and I wasn't. Still, obviously, it wasn't solved right then and there. I gave him some time to think. After like a month, I came back to the subject, and he asked me why I wanted to get married, and I talked about all the laws that protect the couple in the eventuality of disease and death, in owning property, in security if we had children, etc. He suddenly just said, "Oh, I didn't know about that. Then yeah, we'll get married then." We've been happily married for 5 years. Almost every day he says he's so happy being married to me and that his wedding day was one of the happiest of his life. I love the twist of, oh snap, we're more protected if we get married? Seems so genuine. My spouse and I were going to move overseas, and I said we might want to get married first to give ourselves legal protections. Being able to rent an apartment more easily, being able to look after each other's medical needs, easier for our visas, etc. Sure, that makes sense. We got married 3 months later in a very small ceremony on my family's ranch. Would have just done the courthouse, but it's a same-sex marriage and we wanted to make sure we had a nice wedding photo, etc., to help establish our marriage's legitimacy. Almost 4 years in and 100% a great call, both for the, hey, we really like being married to each other part, and for all of the other reasons. I've had several medical emergencies and it's made a difference. No one can stop her from visiting me. We've known each other for more than 30 years, since middle school. Neither of us is going anywhere. I can relate to this so much. My now husband took way too long to propose. After 4 years, I asked him about marriage, and he seemed open to it but not ready. Another year goes by, and I tell him that this is important to me. Another year goes by, and at this point, I have to consider the relationship, if we are even on the same page. After thinking long and hard about what his thought process might be, it occurred to me that I was raised by 2 parents who are still in love. He grew up in the most unstable, unloving, divorced and then stepdad from hell, and then divorced again, abusive home. He had no reason to believe marriage was a benefit. He proposed after 8 years, but at least I knew for sure he wanted it by then, because I had given him an abyss of space on the matter. We have now been together for almost 14 years, and I'm so glad I was patient. He's still sitting across from me as we speak, looking so handsome, taking a break from doing his man work mowing the lawn, and all I needed to do to get this was understand where he was coming from. I knew a guy who didn't propose because he thought he'd had to spend $5,000 on an engagement ring. He worked in a grocery store. He was saving forever, and she left him because he never proposed, so she moved on. That is so sad. I really wanted to marry the man I'm now married to, and I made it clear he could put a twist tie around my finger. Obviously, that was unrealistic, even though I meant it. So I brought him to a jewelry store and picked out a number of affordable rings, the range being $800 to $1,200. He ended up buying me an extremely gorgeous one-of-a-kind ring that was way more expensive than I ever expected. But I needed him to know that money had nothing to do with whether I'd accept. It's super sad that the guy in your story wasn't reassured in that way. Although, if, from his experience with her, he surmised that she wouldn't accept without an expensive ring. Maybe he was right, and ultimately she didn't have the chops or love to stick it out. So maybe it was for the best. I hope so. Story 9. Technically she said yes, but then we went to surprise her family with the good news, and her parents immediately told us to break it off. She was not going to spend her entire remaining life with a black man. We just broke up and moved on. I found a way better girl from a non-racist family. We're married with 3 kids now and doing great. Ex is a drug addict in Kentucky, but at least she's married to a white man living paycheck to paycheck. Dang, was her family secretive as hell with their racism? Or were there signs of that? And is she just a massive pushover? Because to suddenly hear intense racism from your family and just shrug and say, alright, I'll break it off, is nuts. I'm sorry that happened, but it sounds like in the long run, those piles of human garbage did you a favor. We met and started dating in high school track sophomore year. Went on until the proposal during my second semester of college freshman year. Her family was always very friendly and loved having me around. The event went on a few vacations and a baseball game together. She has a brother who was my best friend and 2 sisters that we'd track music with back and forth. Her dad was cool, but we always knew her mom was from a strange southern family in Kentucky. The first time I met her maternal grandpa, he refused to shake my hand. Didn't think his granddaughter should be with me, but her mom protected us by saying to leave her kids alone. When we got back to our home city, the mom had a chat with me about not worrying about what other people think and just focusing on our relationship and keeping her daughter happy. So I knew where they came from, but also was young and naive and assumed they had passed all of that racism stuff. Dad was hip, mom said I was fantastic. She loved me over, but then I think when it came down to getting married, they said they thought this was just a phase for her daughter, and eventually she'd date white men again after me. I don't think they were ready to actually have a black family member. Mom had a lot of say in it. She probably thought about her family and what they'd say or do, thought about family members not coming to the wedding and decided she couldn't have it. The breaking off wasn't immediate. We discussed running off and starting a life on our own without her family's support, but she was just such a family gal. The family was strong and stayed together in everything. They talked about everything too, which was really different from my family. It didn't make sense for her to run away. It'd be horrible. Then her family moved back to Kentucky with her. So after about a year in limbo and long-distance dating/engagement, we just sort of moved on. College parties were picking up for me and I really didn't have time to call all each night anymore, etc. Story 10. Not the guy here, but the naysayer. He had just finished a 1,000-mile solo cycling tour, and I met him in the finish. I was so caught up in his achievement that I did not see the proposal coming and I was shocked. So I told him right there, I love you, but I can't give you an answer right now. Of course, there were tears, and we both called family members and then continued on our planned holiday. We had such a good time on our holiday and were able to enjoy each other's company like normal, so I figured that if we can handle this bump in the road this well, we are a great team, and at the end of the holiday I told him I would love to marry him. That was 7 years ago, and I haven't regretted my decision for a second. I simply needed time to process a life-changing choice, and my partner was mature enough to understand this. The person who does the proposal typically has weeks or even months to come to this decision. The other person sometimes has seconds. Even if you generally want to marry that person, it's still a life-changing choice. Story 11. I said yes, but then the next day I got the ring back, because I got cold feet. Then I realized I was wrong to give it back, and thankfully, he gave it back to me a week later. This was 43 years ago, and we're still going strong. Something similar happened with my best friend. He asked my advice about proposing, and basically I told him that only fools and movie characters ask someone to marry them. Usually two people who have been together for a while naturally have that conversation, and if they haven't, then they're not ready. He took my advice and they sat down and talked about it as a couple. She said it was a good idea to get married, but she would like a traditional proposal. I'm not sure what the deal was with that. Anyway, he did the cheesy grand gesture, and I guess that in between the time they talked and him doing what she wanted, she had second thoughts and said no. They ended up breaking up actually. About a month later, she decided that she made a huge mistake and tried getting back together with him. Sadly for her, it was too late. He decided he didn't want to play the same games that she did. It worked out though. He met someone else who was a better fit eventually. Story 12. Not my story, but told by our jeweler when we were buying our wedding bands. So a guy comes in to buy an engagement ring. The jeweler sits down with him to talk about design, cost, and what have you. Our jeweler always asks people about how they're going to propose. She likes to share in the excitement. The guy brags about how he's going to propose to his girlfriend at a ball game, on the big screen in front of the entire stadium, while his favorite team plays. As the guy is speaking, our jeweler notices that everything is centered around the guy, from the ring to the proposal. No mention of what his girlfriend likes. Our jeweler gets a bad feeling, but she sells him the ring. Not long after, the guy comes back in with the ring. The girlfriend said no, which really didn't surprise the jeweler. I appreciate that she didn't save him by telling him it was a bad idea. If she did, either he'd be really offended and decide to go with a different jeweler, or he would actually take her seriously and his girlfriend would never find out what a selfish asshole he is. It's tough when the proposal doesn't go as planned. It sounds like the jeweler picked up on some red flags about the proposal being more about the guy's preferences than considering what his girlfriend might have wanted. Communication and knowing each other's preferences can really make a difference in such a special moment. Story 13. Guys, if you're reading this thread and want one strong takeaway from it, always talk to your significant other and make sure they want to marry you before proposing. I know the movies from the old days make it seem like it should be a surprise, but it really shouldn't be. It should be something you've been talking about for a while, and it should come after you have had multiple talks about your future together. No one likes having to devastate someone, and a lot of hurt feelings can be avoided by communication. Let the moment that you propose be a surprise, but the fact that you would propose at all be pre-established. The fact that you propose shouldn't be a surprise. How you propose is the only surprise, and you can usually never go wrong in private. There is a certain kind of person who wants to be proposed at a baseball game or in the middle of a crowded restaurant. They will let you know who they are. If they've never said, "How romantic," when you see it happen IRL or in a movie, don't try it yourself. Yes to having the conversation, and it can still be a surprise. My spouse and I had the conversation, we planned, we went ring shopping together. When we agreed we were ready, he made the final decision on the ring himself and surprised me with the proposal a couple of months later. So I knew it was coming sometime, I just didn't know when or how. It was beautiful and perfect, and I wouldn't change a thing. So if you're imagining a big surprise proposal, you can still do that. Just have the talks and know what the answer will be first. Never ask the question unless you're 1000% sure of the answer. It shouldn't be a question as much as a confirmation. There should be conversations beforehand. My wife flat out told me while we were dating that she wanted to get married someday, and if I was up for it, I could ask any time. I had a big date night planned and was going to take her out to our favorite restaurant. Then her sister came into town and wanted to go out to dinner, so my wife asked to reschedule the date night. I had been planning it as a surprise, so she didn't know it was anything special, so I of course said yes. I rescheduled dinner and our date night for the next week, but I was so giddy and excited to ask her that I kind of lost my cool, and she knew something was up. She asked me why I was acting so weird, and jokingly, but seriously said she knew I was hiding something from her. I didn't want to wait anymore. I loved this woman more than anything in the world, and she meant everything to me. So I went into our bedroom and got the ring. She had worked a late shift, so she was just eating dinner around 1 a.m., and everything about it is forever burned into my memory. She was wearing a Budweiser t-shirt and pajama pants with wet hair, and she was eating burnt mac and cheese. I walked into our living room, got down on one knee, and tried to ask. I was so nervous I barely got through it before gasping for breath. She set her bowl down and started crying because she thought she looked like a slob, but her answer was, and I quote, "Of course I'll marry you, dummy." We'll be married for 6 years in October, and I can't imagine life without her. We moved 1,500 miles away from both of our families to start a life together, got a dog, bought a house, and every day I wake up and I feel like I'm the luckiest man in the world. She's the most beautiful, funny, strong, smart, and kind woman I've ever met. She loves me for who I am, and I'd be lost without her. She taught me how to positively communicate my emotions instead of just being angry all the time, and she taught me how to be the best version of myself. I'm so much more well-rounded as a man than I used to be. Sorry for writing this love letter to my wife. I should go let her know what's on my mind. Have a good night, everyone. Story 14. My friend proposed once and she said no. It was very early in their relationship. She said she only feels comfortable marrying him if he bought a house first. 10 years later, he's afraid to ask her again because she has a standard of how she wants to be proposed to. With a fireworks show, a tropical beach area with all her friends watching, and a big diamond-sized ring like the videos that she saw on TikTok. But now all of her friends are getting married around her, so she now wants him to propose again. It's a weird waiting game for both of them. Why do people set themselves up for disappointment in situations like this? She's seen movies and TikTok videos of proposals and now wants it to be this huge, impossible to pull off event. And now he's too scared to even do it for her for fear that she won't like it. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.